Hey everybody, it's Eric from EPAutos.com, your libertarian car guy. I wanted to offer up some general thoughts on the current SUV market, in particular the full-size SUV market. I've had several of the 2025 and 26 models to test drive recently, including the Tahoe and the Expedition and, now the Toyota Sequoia. And the striking thing to me is just how pricey these things have become. Pricey in context too, because certainly models like the Expedition and the Tahoe, fairly recently, within the last 5 years, certainly within the last 10 years, were, fairly middle-class kinds of vehicles, evidence for which is you see them all over the place. And they typically started, the base price of those models within the past 5 years was in the mid-high 40,000 range, which is manageable for a middle-income family to deal with. Well, now these vehicles are not transacting, boy, that's a separate matter, but their sticker prices now, their base prices are in the low 60s. And, that's the base model with two-wheel drive. Once you get into a four-wheel drive iteration of it and you add a few options, typically you're pushing $70,000. And you go up the food chain from there, and like, for example, this Sequoia that I'm driving this week is very close to being a $100,000 vehicle. And yeah, they're equipped with all sorts of things. This one has massaging seats. They've got these touch screens, which by the way are cheap for the manufacturer to put in the vehicle. But the point that I wanted to get at here is I feel as if we have sort of passed a point beyond which these things, the sales of these things are going to necessarily collapse, because middle-income people, certainly working-income people, cannot afford these things anymore. It's out of hand. What do you suppose the monthly payment would be on a vehicle with a $60-something thousand base price? Depending on the interest rate, it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of $800 a month for a vehicle. And mind, that's not including the piling on costs of the insurance that you're obliged to buy, which of course is premised, at least in part, on the repair and replacement costs of a $60-something thousand vehicle. I haven't had a chance to look into it, but I would just spitball it. I've been covering the industry for 30-something years, so I feel as though I've got a good handle on this. You tell me if I'm way off base here, but I would bet that for a person with a clean driving record, insuring something like a $65,000 Tahoe or Expedition is probably going to cost them around $2,500 to $3,000 a year. That's a lot of money, particularly when you factor it out over, say, 5 or 6 years. And I just don't know anybody whose income has risen proportionately with the cost of everything, vehicles included. Vehicles are just one of the many things that have gotten so much more expensive lately. And yes, I know some of that is inflation. It's immaterial, though, what the source of it is, because our incomes have not inflated accordingly. It would be fine if most of us were still earning, or were currently earning, the amount of money that was necessary and equivalent to buy something like a $48,000 Tahoe. I wanted to pass the clover, but I can't. This is like, I sometimes think we're in a sim. The one and only passing zone that I have, and there's other cars coming the other way. Now watch. When I get to the end of the passing zone, probably there'll be no more cars. So now I'll be stuck behind this guy who wants to do exactly the speed limit. And I'm not faulting the guy. He doesn't have a radar detector probably, and he doesn't want to get nailed by a cop for doing 60 in a 65 and then have his insurance go up 30%. It's getting insufferable. Anyway, back to my point, I wonder whether the manufacturers have thought of this, or whether they're in on this, or whether there's a broader agenda here, and I think that there is. I think the whole end game here is to essentially price most of us out of vehicles, and I think we're rapidly approaching that point. It's going to be a situation where only very affluent people are going to be able to deal with the high cost of vehicles. I know the manufacturers think they're going to be able to get on this sort of streaming video model where you just pay a fee to be able to use the vehicle for a period of time. That's still not going to deal with the underlying issue, because they have to make the cost back, don't they? They have to make their money back. So they're still going to have to charge you exorbitantly. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this morning. More over at EPAutos.com, the web's best libertarian gearhead site. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll have more for you again soon.